The words hit my chest like ice water, but I didn't move, didn't cry, didn't even blink as my father's voice thundered across the kitchen. "You've ruined everything we built for you, Isabella. Get out." The morning light streaming through our bay windows suddenly felt foreign, like I was watching someone else's life collapse in slow motion. My hand instinctively moved to my barely there belly as my mother froze at the bottom of the stairs. Her laundry basket slipped from her trembling fingers. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, broken only by my father's ragged breathing and the distant hum of the refrigerator, sounds that had been the soundtrack of 18 years in this house. "I'm keeping my baby," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Before you continue, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. My name is Isabella. I'm 18 and a recent high school graduate. This is the story of how I transformed rejection into recognition. What they didn't know, what I'd never told them, was that I'd been planning for this moment for months. While they assumed I was throwing my life away, I'd already secured a job, signed a lease, and mapped out a future that had nothing to do with their approval. The father of my baby wasn't some stranger from a gas station. He was someone whose identity would have shocked them speechless, but I'd made a promise to keep that secret. Not because I was ashamed, but because some things are worth protecting. "Pack your things," my father continued, his jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck bulged. "You want to play adult? Fine. Live like one." I turned to my mother, searching her face for any sign of the woman who'd kissed my scraped knees and helped me with homework. Instead, I found a stranger who whispered, "You're such a disappointment," like I'd committed murder instead of creating life. That night, I sat on a secondhand mattress in my studio apartment across town, eating soup from a can and feeling more alone than I'd ever thought possible. No calls, no texts, not even from friends who'd suddenly decided I was too much trouble to associate with. But I wasn't broken. I had something they'd never given me, a plan. 3 weeks before everything exploded, I'd secretly taken a receptionist position at Davidson Medical Center. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the woman who hired me, didn't care about my age or my situation. She just said, "If you're willing to work hard, you have a place here." So I showed up every morning at 6:30 a.m. and stayed past closing. While my belly grew, so did my determination. At night, I devoured online courses in accounting, business management, and healthcare administration. I wasn't just surviving. I was preparing for a future they couldn't imagine. At 7 months pregnant, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I collapsed at the bus stop after pulling a double shift, my body giving out from months of overwork and stress. Dr. Martinez found me there, shivering and crying, clutching my swollen stomach. She didn't lecture me. She just canceled her next appointment and sat beside me on the cold bench. "You're not okay," she said simply. "No," I whispered, "but I will be." That's when she handed me something that would change everything, a letter of recommendation. My sister runs the finance department at Regional Medical Corporation headquarters. Give this to her. "Why are you helping me?" I asked through tears. Her smile was sad but determined. "Because you remind me of someone I once failed to help. I don't make that mistake twice." 2 months later, I held my son Nathan for the first time. As I looked into his curious eyes and touched his tiny fists, I made a promise that would drive every decision for the next 15 years. He would never feel unwanted, not like I had. What followed were years of sacrifice that would have broken most people. Night shifts while Nathan slept, remote data entry jobs during his naps. Slowly, methodically, I climbed from receptionist to billing coordinator to financial analyst. Dr. Martinez's sister, Caroline, became more than a boss. She became a mentor. "Don't wait for anyone to save you," she'd told me on my first day. "Save yourself." By Nathan's second birthday, I'd moved us into a small townhouse with clean floors and a yard where he could play. I framed a photo of his first birthday and placed it by the entrance. Every time I came home exhausted, it reminded me why I never gave up. Meanwhile, my parents' lives continued as if I'd never existed. Through social media and family gossip, I watched my younger cousin graduate from Duke, saw my brother marry a successful lawyer. Every family photo looked polished and proud, with one glaring absence: me. I was the closed chapter until I decided to rewrite the story. By age 26, I'd been promoted to Director of Operations at Regional Medical Corporation. The meeting where Caroline slid the offer across the table is burned into my memory. Starting salary, $145,000. Full benefits. You'll lead a team of 15, and yes, Nathan can stay in our executive daycare program. I couldn't speak. After 8 years of clawing my way up, someone finally saw what I was capable of. That day, I picked up 8-year-old Nathan early from school. Wild brown curls bouncing, bright hazel eyes full of curiosity, wearing the confidence I'd spent years building in him. "Where are we going, Mom?" he asked, buckling his seatbelt. "Home," I said, unable to stop smiling. "Our real home." The house I bought in Riverside Historic District had 3 bedrooms, crown molding, and a garden Nathan could explore. I paid cash, no mortgage needed, but there was still one part of my story I'd kept locked away, even from Nathan. His father wasn't some teenage mistake. He was Dr. James Wellington, a surgical resident I'd met during his rotation at Davidson Medical. Brilliant, kind, and completely devoted to his career. When I'd told him about the pregnancy, he'd offered financial support. I'd refused, not out of pride, but because I wanted Nathan to be chosen, not obligated. James had moved to Boston for his residency, and I'd made the decision to raise Nathan alone rather than burden him with responsibilities he hadn't asked for. Now, 15 years after my parents threw me out, a letter arrived at my office. My mother's shaky handwriting on cream-colored stationery. "Isabella, your cousin mentioned you live nearby. We didn't know how to reach you. We would like to see you and meet your grandson. Please, if you're willing." I sat in my executive office for an hour holding that letter, not crying, not raging, just feeling a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. When I invited them to dinner the following Saturday, I didn't warn them about anything. I didn't mention my position, the house, or the life I'd built with the very hands they'd said were only meant for failure. I wanted them to walk through the door they'd slammed in my face and finally understand what they'd thrown away. The following Saturday evening, I prepared for their visit with careful attention to every detail. They arrived 10 minutes early, of course. My father, Marcus Rivera, was the kind of man who needed to control every interaction. Through the tall windows, I watched them approach, both overdressed, my mother clutching her purse like armor, eyes scanning my front porch and manicured garden with obvious confusion. I opened the door before they could knock. The transformation in my appearance hit them immediately. Gone was the scared girl in a hoodie, replaced by a woman in a tailored sapphire blouse and elegant black slacks. The confidence I wore wasn't borrowed or performed. It was earned through 15 years of proving them wrong. "Isabella." My mother's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They entered my home like museum visitors afraid to touch anything. Light poured through sheer curtains, illuminating hardwood floors and carefully curated family photos. Everything smelled of fresh coffee and vanilla candles. "Nice place," my father muttered, but it wasn't a compliment. It was bewilderment. "Nathan's upstairs. He'll be down shortly." They stood in my living room, eyes darting between the grand piano, the built-in bookshelves, the original artwork on the walls. Everything they saw contradicted the narrative they'd created about my inevitable failure. "We weren't sure you'd respond to our letter," my mother said carefully. "Your cousin Sarah saw your photo in that Healthcare Executive magazine article and told us you were successful. She helped us find your office address." "We were wrong," she continued. "We thought if we were tough, you'd change course. We didn't know you'd actually succeed on your own." "That was the point," I replied quietly. My father shifted uncomfortably. "You were just a kid with no plan." "I had a child, a job, and more determination than you gave me credit for," I corrected. Before he could respond, footsteps echoed from upstairs. Nathan appeared, now 15, tall and lean, dressed in a crisp white button-down and dark jeans. His calm confidence and kind eyes marked him as someone who'd been loved unconditionally his entire life. "Nathan," I said, "these are your grandparents." He descended the remaining stairs and stood beside me. "Hello," he said with perfect manners. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My father took a half step forward, lips parting in shock. But what truly stunned them was when Nathan walked to the mantel and retrieved a framed photograph. He handed it to my mother with quiet pride. "That's my father," he said. "Dr. James Wellington. He's chief of cardiovascular surgery at Boston General now. He visits every few months, and we spend summers together at his lake house." My mother nearly dropped the photo. In it, Nathan stood beside a distinguished man in surgical scrubs, both of them grinning beside a sailboat. "He sends me medical journals and textbooks," Nathan continued conversationally. "I'm planning to follow his path. Pre-med at Harvard, then surgical residency." James and I maintained a respectful co-parenting relationship, though we never rekindled our romantic connection. Our focus remained entirely on Nathan's well-being. Before they could process that bombshell, Nathan retrieved another frame from the bookshelf. This one showed me at a podium surrounded by corporate executives, the Regional Medical Corporation logo prominent behind me. "Mom runs the entire operations division," Nathan said with genuine admiration. "She oversees 4 hospitals and manages a budget of $200 million. They just featured her in Healthcare Executive magazine." That's when my father's face drained of all color. His legs seemed to give out slightly, and he gripped the back of my sofa for support. "You built all this?" he whispered. I looked directly at him, my voice carrying 15 years of sacrifice and determination. "No, I built myself. Everything else just followed." The silence that filled my living room was complete. My father couldn't sit down. His pride wouldn't allow it, and his shock wouldn't support it. My mother sank onto the edge of the couch, still clutching Nathan's photo, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. Nathan stood calmly beside me, hands folded, displaying the poise and confidence I'd spent 15 years nurturing in him. He wasn't confused or scared. He understood exactly who these people were and why they'd been absent from his life. "I didn't know you were in contact with his father," my father finally managed. "I wasn't for years," I replied. When Nathan turned 10, I reached out to James, but their relationship developed on my terms, at my pace. I wanted Nathan to know stability before he experienced anything else. My mother spoke through her tears. "He's beautiful, Isabella, absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," I said simply. "We made such a terrible mistake," she continued, her voice breaking. I didn't respond immediately because some words come too late to matter. My father suddenly erupted, not with anger but desperation. "You could have called us. You could have come home. We would have helped." "No," I cut him off, my voice sharp with finality. "You told me to leave. You didn't ask if I had a plan, resources, or support. You assumed the worst and made sure I knew I wasn't welcome." 15 years of suppressed pain sharpened my words. "You threw out your daughter on the worst day of her life, and now you want to sit in the house she bought and pretend none of it happened." My mother sobbed openly. "I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for everything." I looked down at her and felt something I hadn't expected. Not hatred, not anger, but complete closure. "I forgave you years ago," I said quietly, "but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences." My father looked stunned. "Isabella, we want to be part of your lives. Nathan deserves to know his grandparents." I turned to Nathan. "Go get your jacket, honey. We have dinner reservations." He nodded and headed upstairs, his steps light and unburdened. My mother looked up through her tears. "Will we see you again?" I paused, considering her question carefully. "That depends on whether you want to meet your grandson or keep living in the fantasy that the past doesn't matter. Because Nathan deserves people in his life who choose him completely, not people who might abandon him the moment things get difficult." I walked them to the door. They stood on my porch for a long moment, silent and shell-shocked, still processing everything they'd seen. I didn't hug them. I didn't make promises I wasn't ready to keep. I simply said, "You have my number now. When you decide what kind of grandparents you want to be, call me." And with that, I closed the door softly behind them. For the first time in 15 years, it was me standing on the inside of the house with everything I'd built, while they stood outside wondering what they'd lost. Nathan appeared beside me, jacket on, car keys in hand. "Ready, Mom?" "Ready," I said, looking around at our life. The photos, the achievements, the peace we'd created together. Let's go celebrate. As we drove to dinner, Nathan asked, "Do you think they'll call?" I smiled, remembering the scared 18-year-old who'd once sat on a mattress eating soup from a can. I think they'll try, but they'll have to prove they've changed, not just apologize for who they used to be. And if they don't? Then we keep living the life we built, I said, reaching over to squeeze his hand, the one where you've never doubted for a second that you were wanted. Looking back, that moment of rejection in their kitchen had felt like the end of everything. Instead, it became the beginning of everything that mattered. Sometimes the people who refuse to believe in you do you the greatest favor of all. They force you to believe in yourself. 3 weeks later, they called. Not to apologize again, but to ask if Nathan might want to meet them for coffee, on his terms when he was ready. It was the first time they'd put his needs before their own guilt. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.